Well, hello everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for another one of our MAG specialist seminars. We're very pleased to have you here. Today I'm actually coming to you from the hotel realm in our nation's capital, where I'm attending the Australia and New Zealand Occupational Medicine annual conference. So it's really been a very interesting few days for me, but I wouldn't have missed hosting this seminar for the world. Now, I'm going to ask that all of our participants keep yourselves on mute, please. And the reason for that is so that any noise from your home or workplace doesn't interrupt the recording, because we all want the recording to be of the highest quality. Today we have coming, there we go, in a sec. All right, so today we have a really interesting seminar by two amazing occupational therapists. We have the very lovely Kate Roberts. Kate is a specialist mental health occupational therapist. She has 24 years lived experience in both as a consumer and as a deliverer of mental health support and care services. And as we all know, in this industry, the role of mental health from an occupational therapy perspective is one that is often underestimated, but of absolutely critical importance and fundamental to whole of person care and support for people. So I will mute myself soon, and the noise back here won't be in the way. My apologies. Now, Kate is going to give the first part of the talk, and then she will be handing over to Adam Baldock. Adam is an author, a rehab consultant, an occupational therapist, and his specialty is on assessments where pain is a focus of the person's presentation. So I know that you're all going to enjoy this seminar very, very much. Again, I ask if you please keep yourself on mute throughout the session. At the end of the session, there will be a time for you to ask questions. If you need to leave the session early and you have questions, please put them in the chat and I will make sure that they are asked and addressed. If you have any questions afterwards, you can always send them to me in an email. So without further ado, over to you, Kate, and thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Michelle. This is a great opportunity. Okay, share screen. I'm looking for, I cannot see the, hang on a minute. I'm very sorry. Can it go back to you just for a minute? I cannot find the presentation. Michelle.
That's all right. So you've got that on your computer somewhere?
Yeah, I'll find it. I thought it was there, but it's not. So
that's okay.
I'll let you talk for a moment. My apologies.
No worries. That's all right. We're just getting our act together. For those of you too who are attending this seminar, not sure if you know that if you ever register for one of our seminars and for whatever reason it turns out you're unable to attend, you don't need to cancel your registration, because you will still receive the recording afterwards, and that way you're not going to miss. Adam is saying he can go first if you're not ready, Kate.
Thank you. That would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Magic. All right, over to you then, Adam.
No problem. Thanks very much, folks. Now I'll just do the same. Hopefully I can find it as well. Yes, great. There we go. Things. Send. Mode. Oh, we're at the end. All right, let's go and take that back to the start. You love technology. There we go. Okay. So thanks very much, folks. I'm here today to present on the physical capacity assessment, which is not to be confused with the functional capacity assessment. And I'll talk about the differences coming up. Just so you know who I am, I'm an occupational therapist, rehabilitation consultant, and business coach. I've authored a book called Transform Your Life After Injury, Mental Illness, or if you just don't like the life you live. I've got 23 years of occupational therapy experience. I've found and sold some allied health clinics, worked in the injury management game and for corporates, life insurance, work cover and TAC. Done a lot of workplace assessments over the 23 years, so there's very few workplaces I'm not familiar with. And I've been doing medico-legal assessments for about 8 years, completing over 150 of them for both plaintiff and defence. Very familiar with the ADL functional capacity assessments that a lot of law firms require. A lot of work in the NDIS space, paediatric and care needs. And the business coaching I do is primarily around injured workers, both physically and with mental health issues that can no longer run their businesses. So we work with them to change their business structure or sell their business if they need to, or create more revenue and things to be able to bring managers on. And finally, I'm internationally accredited for the work HAB rehabilitation system, which is what we're basically going to talk about today. So today's session, we're going to look at what is a physical capacity assessment. We're going to look at how it differs from the functional capacity assessment as well. We'll look at the stages of it, being the pre-reading, the assessment itself, and the evaluation. Then we'll have a look at a couple of cases that I've been involved in. We'll talk about how you can prepare your client for this assessment, and then we'll go to any questions if you have any. So let's get started. So what is the physical capacity assessment? Effectively, it is exactly what it sounds like, except in this case, as opposed to a functional capacity assessment, we actually put them through a physical assessment, which can take up to 4 hours. The physical assessment looks at their cardiovascular fitness. So we put them through some cardiovascular exercise. We might get them to hold postural tolerances. We'll look at this, their ability to squat, bend, reach, so forth. We look at their dynamic tolerances, so walking, climbing stairs, climbing ladders, and we look at their physical capability to lift, carry, transfer items. This assessment can be customized to be more job specific, which I'll talk about a bit more in the not too distant future. The work HAB, this assessment is an accredited system internationally. It's the work HAB functional capacity evaluation system. It's been validated through hundreds of studies. Its information can be used to compare to workplace demands or the demands of any environment that you might have a worker or a claimant looking to enter or work in. The system was recently tested in court, Akarachi versus Alvey, and some precedents were set there, finding that this type of assessment was well placed to produce the information needed in the legal realm. So we'll talk about that because that's one of the cases that we're going to look at. Just trying to move. That's what I'm after. So looking at the differences between the assessments, I'm moving quite fast here because I'm conscious that I've only got 20 minutes. So looking at the differences, the physical capacity assessment itself is a deeper dive into the physical capacity of a person and is an objective measure of the participant's overall health and capacity. The purpose of it is to physically assess the physicality and test a participant's function. And in this particular assessment, as you'll see from some of the information coming up, they can't hide from their physical capability. So this assessment makes sure that they can't do anything to make sure to override their capability or show that they can do more than what they're actually capable of. As opposed to the functional capacity assessment, which a lot of people out there might be familiar with, which looks more at a person's capability in their daily tasks at home, their activities of daily living, at work, and out in the community. The purpose being of the functional capacity assessment to define the needs and objectives of an individual and how they can actually participate in the community easier, identify their needs for support, equipment, aids, etc. So the stages of physical capacity assessment. The stages are very similar to that of a functional capacity assessment. It's just primarily the actual assessment itself that is primarily different. Oops, let's go back. There we go. So we have the 3 stages: the pre-read, which is all the information sent, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The assessment itself, which is constructed primarily of 2 stages, which is interview and observation, and the evaluation, the write-up and the recommendations that might be made. In the pre-read. So in a lot of instances, when we're doing the medico-legal assessment of this nature, we can be sent hundreds and thousands of pages in which are not all relevant. So what I'm looking for in this type of assessment is the most recent medical reports. And when I say the most recent, within the last 5 years, preferably. And it's usually the last 2 years that I'm most interested in. We're looking at the most recent scans, anything that's in there to tell us what pathology looks like, and any discharge documents if they've been in hospital or had any in rehabilitation programs, etc. Anything that basically tells us the current status and can give me a prognosis of what their future looks like. The next stage of the assessment is the interview. So in this part, we're looking at the person's presentation, how they're dressed, how they move, how they speak. What's their attitude towards the assessment? Are they unhappy about having to perform it, or are they okay to be involved? We're looking at the history, and when I look at the history, I'm looking at their interpretation of the history and how that matches up against the documentation and the medical evidence. We're looking at the medical status as well. Again, that's their opinion of their medical status, and again, that's matched against the doctor's reports and their treaters' opinions. Looking at what current treatment they're currently having, medication, their perceived capacity, their social situation, family, accommodation, employment, cognitive function, and their ability to use transport. So you can see that most of those segments and categories align quite well to the functional capacity assessment as well. Now, the physical capacity assessment can be a 4-hour assessment. In most instances, the functional is around about 2 with the person, 2 to 3. But for the physical capacity assessment, we use what's called the baseline heart rate. So on each of the activities coming up, which we'll see in the next slide, you need to bring the patient or the participant back to a baseline heart rate, which in some cases can be quite a long time. I've had some participants that have taken up to 20 minutes to recover from doing a test. And then when you add that up over, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, possibly 10 areas that they get tested in. And some of those have sub-tests. So there can be up to about 20 tests in total. If they're taking 20 minutes to recover for each time, it can be quite a long assessment. So when we move into the physical assessment, they get attached to a heart rate monitor. There's 2 reasons for that. One, so that we can measure the beats above baseline. But number 2, it allows us to see when pain occurs. So when pain occurs during the assessment, there's usually a spike in the heart rate, which is closely followed by a stabilization back down to the previous heart rate. So it's as I said earlier, it's very difficult for them to hide from having pain. They can tell you they're not in pain, but most of the time you can see it on the heart rate monitor. In this part of the assessment, we do a range of movement test, just checking their capability and their any injuries that we might need to protect during the assessment. We put them through a step test, which is the cardiovascular. That's a 3-minute stepping up and down, and depending on their general fitness, is usually a good measure of how they're going to perform and how long the assessment is going to take. We then look at the postural tolerance. So as I said earlier, we might get them to sit through to hold different postures. And usually we relate those postures to their injury. So if they've got a back injury, for example, we might try and get them to hold a squat position for as long as they can. For a knee injury, then we might have them kneeling, and so forth. With shoulder injury, we might have them reaching above their head, type of thing. Always depends on their capability, and we're not there to harm anyone, so it's always within their potential capacity. We get them to go through a number of lifting tasks. So they not only lift a graded weight that are gradually increased over time, but they're lifting them to different heights and different places, to the side, up, down, so forth. So we get a really good picture of their overall physical capability. And it also tests different parts of the body. For the carry tasks, again, it's a graded carrying capability that we can do over various distances, depending on the needs. And then moving in the dynamic, of course, it depends on their capability to where the injury is, of course. So sometimes we might eliminate a dynamic test if it's based on if they've got a upper limb injury and walking is unaffected. As far as endurance goes, that's a repetitive lifting. So in that one, they don't get a graded increase in weight, but they do have to. They actually get to choose the weight they want to lift. So as you could imagine, some of the stronger men want to show off a little bit and lift as much as they can, which is not necessarily a good choice when the whole idea of the test is to lift for as long as you possibly can. Some of them come out pretty early. Luckily, the evaluation methods of the actual assessment means that we take that into account, so it's a good objective measure. And then finally, there's the customized side of it. So we can customize this, as I said earlier, we can customize this to segments of it to be more specific to potential needs. So if anyone out there has an actual measure that they need in there, and so for an example of that might be for truck drivers getting in and out of their cab, or getting in and out of up and down from the back of the truck, we can actually put a different task in there that measures that and has them doing that specific task. And we can do it to specific areas of the body. As I mentioned earlier, if they've got back injuries, knee injuries, etc., we can be more focused on those and have tests that are more focused on those areas. Then we come to the evaluation. So as per any assessment, it's a collation of data. There's a specific software that we use called the WorkHab software. Someone put in a lot of thought to that. And it takes into account all the beats above baseline that we were talking about earlier. Provides us graphs to show where they've gone above baseline and where potentially their pain levels lie, and takes into account their physicality and what work they've done and how much effort and they've had to put in, as well as the pain levels that they've measured. So right throughout the assessment, we're asking them after every task what their pain levels are and whether they've gone up or down. We're also asking them how they perceive their effort that they had to put into those tasks. And that's taken into account in the software and provides the final measure, which is overall objective, and allows us to be able to provide some good insight into their actual physical capability. And then finally, we make some recommendations, which may be that they can potentially undertake various activities with the help of aids and equipment. They might need some adjustment to the way they do things, in which case we can provide them modified techniques and so forth. Or it may well be that they can't undertake certain tasks, and we have to take that into account as well. So who should use this type of assessment? It can be used for either plaintiff and or defence. It's best used where there's a physical evaluation required and you're looking for a picture of the person's physical capability. I've used this primarily in employment situations where employability has been in question or employment has been questioned after an injury. And it's a very good model for that because the customization side allows us to actually put them in a scenario that is very closely aligned to the job, if not actually having them do some of the job tasks involved in the assessment. It's a good one to use if you're looking to measure the loss of physical function, and it's also good if you want to match physical capability to any required task, as I mentioned before. Now, I've done well over 80 of these, so and quite a few, so I thought I'd just share a couple of cases with you. Case one was a defence case, and it's the one where the precedence was set, Karachi versus Aldi Stores. The employee was a Aldi Stores employee in their warehouse, or distribution centre. She had a left-sided shoulder injury, and she'd had 2 surgeries on that. Obviously, Aldi Stores have a duty of care, and they're very good at working through their work cover commitments and requirements. So this was a fair bit down the track. It wasn't as if this person was terminated at a point where, at the start of their claim, there was several return to works tried, with her injuring a second time, hence the second surgery. So after some period of time, she was terminated tongue-tied. Her employment was terminated after the injury, and it was terminated on the basis of an inability to complete inherent tasks of the role and the risk of further injury to others if retained, to herself or others if retained. The physical capacity assessment was completed, and unfortunately, Ms. Karachi was unable to meet the baseline required, and her termination was sustained. She later took Aldi to court on that basis, and as I said earlier, the court found that the functional capacity assessment was a robust assessment, and the reporting was appropriate to provide evidence to the fact that she was unable to complete the tasks, and therefore the risk of her engagement or being retained at Aldi Stores was too high, and the court held up for Aldi, which was a good outcome. I'm happy to share, I have a document here of the outcome of that and what the judge said in that particular instance. If anyone was interested in that, I can certainly provide that to the guys for distribution if necessary or desired. And then the other case again was another Aldi Stores one, plaintiff case. This gentleman had a knee injury. Again, her employment was terminated sometime down the track, where the injury, after several attempts for return to work, termination was based on the inability, again, to complete inherent tasks, etc. In this particular case, we did the physical capacity assessment. It's completed, and he exceeded the baseline after he'd had some rehabilitation, and so his employment was reinstated. So it was a great outcome for the employee in that particular instance. That's basically it, folks. I do feel like that was pretty quick, but I'm also conscious that we have a lot of time. So if there's any questions, I think we were going to do questions at the end, Michelle, was that correct?
Yeah, we've got one quick question for you, if you wouldn't mind now, before we hand over to the lovely Kate. Is that all right?
Yeah, sure. No problem.
Okay, let me just get to this. Oh, no. There we go. Okay. Some of the tasks look very similar to a pre-employment medical assessment where people are excited to perform their absolute best. Granted,
Yes.
This is a very different setting though. Do you see a lot of psychosocial factors or avoidance worry about injury aggravation via the test when an injured person presents for a physical capacity assessment?
Yes. Yeah, that's the quick answer is yes. So some people do come in and they're worried that being put through the physical tasks is going to aggravate their injury, and so they can take a softer approach to the tasks, and some people even decline to participate in certain tasks. And we accept that. Effectively, a participant can stop a task at any time, and they can also decline to do a task if they feel that it's beyond their capability. So the short answer to that is yes, we do, but there is ways to manage that as well, where we can modify the task to make them feel more comfortable and allow us to get a more objective measure.
Well, thank you so much, Adam. And everyone, you can see on this slide here is Adam's book, Transform Your Life, which I can recommend as a very interesting and informative read. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to the very lovely Kate Roberts to present her section of this wonderful seminar. Thank you. Over to you. Kate, are you there? Right. Have you got a mobile number for Kate, Adam? Oh, there we go.
No.
Good. No, all good.
Okay, is that it? Can you see that now?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, thank heavens. Oh my goodness, I nearly had a heart attack.
Yeah, I'll give you
Over to you, lovely.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Kate. I'm just clicking my notes up. Okay, and I will just put that over to the side. Okay, so thanks, Adam. That was really interesting. And over the years, I've certainly done a lot of workplace assessment as well. I did 10 years as an occupational rehab consultant. So I would absolutely agree with everything that Adam said. I now specialise in psychosocial functional capacity, and I let people like Adam do the physical stuff that I'm not trained in the workhab. It's something that I thought about, but I took a different path. So about me, I have 24 years experience as an OT, and I was in the disability sector for 10 years prior to that. I started out my career as a nurse. So I'm old, clearly. As with Adam, I'm registered with AHPRA, the Australian Health Practitioners Regulation Agency, which means that we're bound by the Health Practitioner Regulation National Law Act 2009. So we're bound by the same code and the same regulation as doctors and nurses, and I think there's about 13 health professions that are represented in that national regulatory scheme. So we can't just make things up. We have to comply with very, very strict regulations. My clinical experience in the 24 years as an OT spans primary health care, acute hospital care, inpatient rehabilitation, outpatient rehabilitation, occupational rehab, which was 10 years. So similar to the work that Adam does, but not that deep dive that Adam does. Residential aged care, community aged care, and disability support services pre and post NDIS. I have a real passion for disability services, and I was one of the campaigners way back for the NDIS before it was even called the NDIS. So the Every Australian Counts campaign, which goes back a very long time. I now work solely in the complex mental health NDIS psychosocial disability space, which you may or may not know is an extremely political space. There's an awful lot of argy-bargy going on. has been pretty much since the rollout of NDIS 10 years ago. Psychosocial disability was originally not intended to be in the scheme, then was a last-minute inclusion, has not worked as well as was hoped, and is now being looked at. There's a review happening at the moment about whether it stays in or out of the scheme, and there are very, very strong advocates on both sides of that argument. I also have corporate experience in the public and private sector. I worked as an in-house manager of workplace health, safety, different titles in different organisations, health, safety, wellbeing and injury management roles in the manufacturing sector, in milk processing, and in heavy manufacturing at Thales. I don't know whether you know of Thales. It's a French multinational company. They're a self-insurer. So they make the Bushmaster tanks that our troops use over in war zones. Well, not just our troops, but there are others as well. Safety, well-being, health, injury management is my thing. And I became increasingly interested in the mental health side of things and the psychosocial side of things, because I noticed over the years that many people who start off with a physical injury, particularly a workplace injury, will end up with, sadly, an overlay of psychosocial problems. And that leads to avoidance and declining to be involved in physical capacity assessments and a whole lot of stuff that's not helpful. I became more and more interested in that side of things. I'm a graduate of the Australasian Institute of Clinical Governance, because that's very, very important to the work that I do. And I also have 10 years lived experience as a carer of a family member with severe and complex mental illness. So I have spent many, many hours in mental health tribunals and dealing with the not so pleasant side of the Mental Health Act and compulsory treatment orders and tricky kind of stuff. So that's me. Psychosocial disability. So that's a term that has not been well understood in Australia pretty much until the NDIS coined that term, or the NDIA, the National Disability Insurance Agency, coined that term. It's not something that people generally understand in the community, and I'm guessing that lawyers are no exception. So psychosocial disability is a term used to describe a disability that may arise from a mental health issue. Not everyone who has a mental health condition will have a psychosocial disability. But for people who do, it can be severe, long-standing, and it can very much impact on their recovery. And if a person with this is from experience, in my OC rehab work, and Adam, when we do the questions, Adam will probably have some examples as well. When we see a person with a physical injury who then ends up with an overlay of psychosocial issues, the likelihood of getting them back to work is almost zero. It just becomes a battle. People with a disability as a result of their mental health condition may qualify for the NDIS. So I work a lot in that space, and I've done a number of appeals. So people with mental health conditions, quite severe mental health conditions, who've applied for the NDIS and have been rejected, and have gone to multiple internal reviews and been rejected. There's a whole lot of them. You might be aware there's a whole lot of these appeals waiting to go to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. That appeal process is going to change. Bill Shorten has indicated quite some time ago that that's going to change, but there's a backlog that OTs like myself are involved with, working through those. and I have been working with the lawyers for the National Disability Insurance Agency. So I'm, as with Adam, I'm comfortable working for either the applicant in the case of NDIS or the agency that has said no. I'm happy working with the plaintiff or the defendant in a personal injury type of situation, because the work that we do as OTs must be evidence-based. It's not opinion. And so a person's functional capacity is their functional capacity. You know, it makes no difference to me as a registered health professional who I'm working for. I carry on my assessment in the same way regardless, because the evidence is what matters. It's not about opinion. And yes, I've actually had a number of I've had some pretty successful cases on both sides. I think what matters is that we get a fair outcome for the parties involved. So please, if anyone needs to stop me or ask a question, feel free to put something in the chat. Michelle, you're welcome to flag anything that you, if you see something that needs more explanation.
Thanks, Kate. And look,
Yeah.
it's going well, just conscious of time. So if we can keep the flow going, because people have only got a limited time.
Yeah, okay. How much time have we got? Not much.
Maximum another 20 minutes.
All right, I'll go super fast. I was not going to be that long anyway.
Cool,
right.
magic. Thanks, Kate.
So OTs specialise in function. That's our core business. That's what we do. Adam specialises in physical capacity. I specialise in psychosocial capacity. And whenever we're assessing function, we must be guided by the World Health Organization International Classification of Functioning, ICF. That came out in 2001. It's based on an integrative biopsychosocial model of functioning, disability and health. It's not a purely medical model. That's very important to understand. In the classification of functioning and disability, whether the disability or the diagnosis is medical or physical makes no difference. All conditions are treated equally, so it's diagnosis neutral. And the important thing to understand is that a person's functioning cannot be determined solely by their medical diagnosis or their disability. You must look at what that impairment, what the diagnosis, what the disability means in day-to-day life, whether that's at home, whether that's at work. It's actually how it affects day-to-day life. That's the important factor. This is just an image of the framework, the biopsychosocial model of functioning, disability and health, that came out in 2001. I'm not going to go through it, but it's complex. As a personal injury lawyer, you guys don't need to know all of this. I don't need to know the ins and outs of your job either. It would make my head spin, I'm sure. But you do need to understand that when you make a referral to an OT for a functional capacity assessment, whether it's physical or whether it's psychosocial, it's a complex and time-consuming process. It isn't opinion-based. It is evidence-based. It has to be. We don't diagnose. That's for the medicos. We don't diagnose, we specialise in function, and there is a process that must be followed to come up with the evidence that goes into our report. So I get a little bit cross when, for example, someone might say, oh gosh, why did it take 20 hours to write a report? Well, the report was probably the quickest part. It's the gathering of the evidence that takes the time, and the research and the evaluation that takes the time. And when a person has a psychosocial disability, everything takes much longer because there's typically quite a bit of cognitive impairment. So you might have to ask the same question over and over again. The person might lack the concentration to even be involved in a conversation beyond 10, 20 minutes. it's hard work, quite frankly. It's hard work. All right, so functional capacity assessment for mental health, psychosocial disability, excuse my slurring. We're looking at physical function because that is not deep diving into physical function, but we do know that there are some mental health conditions that impact physical function. For example, a person with very, very severe major depressive disorder might have what's called psychomotor retardation. So everything is slow. Their speech is slow. Their thinking is slow. Their movement is slow. Or it might be that their physical function is impacted by the medications that they are required to take to manage their function. So antipsychotic medication is notorious for some pretty nasty side effects. Some of those side effects include symptoms that are very, very similar to Parkinson's disease. So shaking, for example, not even being able to hold a cup or not being able to do up your own buttons. So we do look at physical function, but we're not deep diving the way Adam would. Cognitive function, lots and lots of assessing of cognitive function. We're looking at and cognitive function isn't just memory, and it isn't just intelligence. In fact, a person can be highly intelligent, but because of their mental health condition, have very, very severe cognitive impairments in comprehension, in expression, in social interaction, planning, problem solving, perception. Their perception of what's real might be quite off. Social function is really is a really important part of what I assess. Economic function. You know, a person who had a job and wants to go back to that job, and there is a job to go back to. Clearly, if there's cognitive issues, we need to work out a way that we can accommodate those if possible. If not possible, can the person meet the inherent requirements to do that job, or is it appropriate for their employment to cease? I won't go into any more detail. I'm conscious of the time. All right, so this is how I go about the assessment process. This is just an overview. It's essentially 5 steps. I would add a 6th step on there, in that I don't submit anything about a person without running it by them. They do not. The examinee does not get a copy of my report from me, but I go over what my findings are with them before I submit. I don't want anyone to have any surprises, bearing in mind that the clients that I deal with are often highly anxious, suicidally depressed. It's very, very important that I manage that well. So it's not about writing a report that the examinee likes, not at all, but nasty surprises can have dire consequences for people with severe mental illness. So I'm very careful about managing that. All right, so first step, this is very similar to what Adam does. First step is I review the referral letter and the documents. Sometimes there's hundreds of pages, not all relevant to the purpose and scope of the assessment. I'm looking for the most recent documents. In particular, I'm looking for a confirmed medical diagnosis. I'm looking for current or previous evidence-based treatment. And I'm looking for current medical status and prognosis. One of the things that's really difficult is when I receive a referral and the person is not fully treated. You cannot assess a person's functional capacity if they're not medically stable. You might be able to do an interim report, but a final report of functional capacity when the person is not fully treated and not stable and is, for example, a recent case, you know, the gentleman was acutely suicidal. When I arrived at his home to do the assessment, he was acutely suicidal. He lived alone. He had no support. He was in a rural community with no one around. So please, it is absolutely important before referring for a functional capacity assessment to ensure that the person is medically stable. They are being treated and they are medically stable. All right, so the second step is selecting the evidence-based assessment tools. So after I've read through the referral letter and the documents, I have to then use my clinical judgment and reasoning to work out, okay, what's the best evidence-based assessment that I can use for the purpose and scope of this assessment that is clinically suitable for the diagnosis that this examinee has, because there's different tools for different diagnoses, and how good are the psychometric properties. There are hundreds of assessments available, and some of them don't have good psychometric properties. So for a medico-legal assessment, I wouldn't use them. It makes no sense to use something that has poor validity. So the third step, so there's a bit of work that's done before I even meet the examinee. So the third step is assessment at the examinee's home. This is really important. I need to go to the person's home and or workplace. I do a face-to-face unstructured interview, and that's very much focused on building trust and rapport and hearing the person's story. It's about sometimes a person really just needs to be heard. Sometimes their perceptions might not be accurate. That can happen quite a bit, but it's important that I allow that person to feel heard. During that time, and it can be 2 to 4 hours, I clinically observe their performance in a very unobtrusive, non-threatening way. I observe the home environment in a very unobtrusive, non-threatening way. And I document my findings in clinician-reported assessment tools. Usually when I get back into the car, I do that. Basically, what I want the client to feel, and the feedback I get is very positive, I want the client to feel that I'm a safe person that they can talk to, that they can open up to, and not be fearful of judgment. I'm an assessor, obviously. I am assessing, but there are ways to do that with people living with mental health conditions that are less scary, I guess. All right. Ideally, we would do all of the formal assessments during the home visit. This is rarely possible when the examinee has a serious mental health condition. But if the OT builds trust and rapport with the examinee during that home visit, then the remaining assessments, the clinician-administered interviews, can be done over the phone. And that's what I frequently do, because the observation of the environment and the observation of performance has been done on the day at the client's home. And then number 5, calculate the results, interpret the findings, do the research, write the report. It's time consuming. There's multiple complexities and variables. But what really, really helps is a good letter of instruction and a schedule of questions from the lawyer. That is always a fantastic help. Really appreciate that. Okay, that's it. If you'd like a copy of the presentation and or references, please contact Michelle. And thanks for your time. Michelle, back to you.
Hello, everybody. That I think I speak for everybody when I say that has been really tremendous. Thank you both, Adam and Kate. That was so interesting. And, you know, the importance of the psychosocial assessment and the understanding of that aspect of injury is so important in this industry, and we all have to be across that. Now, people, does anyone have a question that they would like to ask of Kate or of Adam? If you do, you can unmute yourself, or you can type that into the chat below.
While we're waiting on those questions, Michelle, I'll just say that I am, there's actually quite a lot of equipment involved with the physical assessment that I talked about. However, I am mobile with that equipment, so it's the patient doesn't necessarily need to attend a clinic or anything of that nature. I can do that at their home if necessary. So in Victoria, I can go basically throw the gear in the car. It's not so easy if I'm going interstate, but I do have affiliates in other states that have similar equipment that I can use if people need assessments all over Australia.
Thank you so much for that explanation there, Adam. We have got a question in the chat here for Kate, and I just can't seem to open it.
Okay, I can. Caitlin McElroy. Hi, Caitlin. The assessment tools that I use, the first one that I use, which is quite generic. Someone's talking, I can hear. There's noise. So the HUDAS, which is the World Health Organization Disability Assessment Schedule 2.0. That's my starting point, and that's a generic assessment. It's been validated in multiple languages and across 21 countries worldwide. It can be used for any kind of disability, mental health related or physical. And it's not perfect. None of them are perfect, but if it's done properly, that's a point I need to make. There are multiple versions of the HUDAS 2.0, and many people will grab hold of a self-report. Now, for medico-legal purposes, I am never going to hand someone a self-report and let them tick the boxes. And that is ridiculous. So the HUDAS 2.0 long version, clinician interview administered, has very, very good validity. So that's always my starting point. The second one that I use a lot is the LSP 16, which is the lifestyle profile. The LSP 16 is a briefer version of one that the original LSP had 39 questions. It's mental health specific. It is not used in physical conditions at all. It is only used in mental health conditions. The LSP is preferred by the NDIS because it's shorter. Depending on the complexity of the client and the scope of the assessment that I've been requested to do, sometimes I will use the longer version. But if the LSP 16 will suffice and time is a problem, I will use the shorter version. The other one is the HONOS, which stands for something really funny, Health of the Nation Outcome Scales. Now, it's also a mental health specific validated assessment. And those two, LSP 16 and HONOS, are now mandatory for all government-funded mental health services in Australia. So if anyone has had any contact with mental health admissions or outpatient treatment, they're going to have that information as a baseline. So it's a bit like the equivalent of having a look at the X-rays or CT scans. It's as close as I'm going to get. Because we really can't see so much of the psychosocial stuff. It's invisible. So they would be the main three.
Lovely. Now, there's a question there for Adam. Adam asking, what kind of equipment do you take with you for your assessments? Okay, Adam, did you get that question? What kind of equipment do you use with you in your assessment?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. I was halfway through the answer. So there's a series of weights that we use because obviously we use that for the graded weight when we're measuring lifting capability and carrying, etc. There's a series of various bite-sized boxes that serve as platforms for lifting up to, and there's steps and etc. that also are taken that measure the cardiovascular. There's a couple of dynamometers that we use for hand strength and general muscle strength, as well as heart rate monitors and blood pressure. And I see there, there's a second part to that question that has, how do you report on past and future care needs? So we can add that section in most instances with this particular report. So that would certainly be reported in the functional capacity assessment. But in the physical capacity assessment, we're really looking at a specific moment in time and their physical capability at that time. But we can include a section of past and future care needs as well, if necessary.
Thank you, everybody, especially, of course, Adam and Kate. Thank you so much for giving of your time, your expertise and your information today. We very much appreciate it. Please apologise for the noise behind me. Everyone's come out of the seminar that I'm at and they're all talking, and there's nowhere quiet for me to go. But anyway, everyone, you will receive the recording from this seminar sometime this afternoon, and with the slides. If you have any further questions, you can always contact me and I will do that. And of course, all of our seminars are saved to our YouTube channel, which you can reach through the MagConnect platform on the left-hand side menu tab under seminars, or by simply Googling Medicolegal Assessments Group YouTube. Thank you, everybody, and go and have a fabulous rest of the day.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.